Indie horror is a subgenre of horror video games developed independently by small teams or even individual developers. These games often have a unique and experimental approach to horror with a focus on atmosphere, storytelling, and psychological terror. They can range from first person exploration games to survival horror games and often feature low budget graphics and sound design. These games were popularized by YouTubers who would record themselves playing the games and then reacting to the scares. Because of this, the popularity of indie horror games has grown in recent years, with many titles becoming viral sensations and gaining dedicated fan bases. Although being released in 2010, Amnesia: The Dark Descent didn't take off until early 2011, becoming one of the first viral indie horror games. It received critical acclaim for its innovative gameplay mechanics, minimalistic storytelling, and use of psychological horror and jump scares. In Amnesia, our protagonist Daniel has no way of fighting the game's monsters and must rely on stealth and hiding to survive. This mechanic created a sense of tension and fear in players as they are constantly on the lookout for danger and have to be smart about their movements. Instead of normal cutscene to cutscene storytelling, Amnesia does environmental storytelling, with players piecing together the story through notes, journals, and other clues scattered throughout the game's world. The game's emphasis on player vulnerability and environmental storytelling became hallmarks of the genre, and the game's success would show the importance of YouTube and other social media platforms in promoting and sharing indie horror games. Ib, released in 2012, is a Japanese horror game following a young girl named, Ib. She visits a museum with her parents, soon getting separated. To find her parents, Eve must solve multiple puzzles and face many monsters, with the game having multiple endings based on the player's decisions. Players must use their wits to solve puzzles and survive, with the game's monsters being designed to be creepy and disturbing, along with each one representing a different fear or phobia. These explorations of different themes like perception and identity would soon help lay out the groundwork for future indie horror games. Made in 2012, Slenderman: The 8 Pages is a straightforward game. The player has to collect all 8 pages to end the game, but with each page, Slenderman becomes more and more aggressive. This simple but effective horror game emphasizes exploration and puzzle solving. The game's minimalistic approach to storytelling and use of psychological horror and jump scares made it a hit with players and critics alike. The game's graphics were intentionally grainy and black and white. This aesthetic added to the game's sense of dread and unease. This game would help popularize indie horror games and inspired many other developers to create their own unique horror experiences. During their rise, many iconic indie horror games have left a lasting impact on the gaming industry. Here are some of the most notable indie horror games made in the past decade. Outlast, made in 2013, is a first-person survival horror game that follows a story of investigative journalist Miles Upshur as he explores an abandoned hospital. The game's use of jump scares, stealth mechanics, and emphasis on player vulnerability helped establish it as a classic in the indie horror genre. Five Nights at Freddy's, created in 2014. God, there's so much of this game franchise, so I'm just going to keep this short. Five Nights at Freddy's is a point-and-click survival horror game that takes place in a pizza restaurant where animatronic animals come to life at night. The game's use of jump scares and its environmental storytelling helped establish it as a cultural phenomenon and a classic in the indie horror genre. With Five Nights at Freddy's becoming first of many and many and many games, books, videos, and overall so much lore. Five Nights at Freddy's and Outlast had a big impact on the way horror games are marketed and distributed, with both games getting released exclusively on digital platforms and primarily marketed through social media and word of mouth. Doki Doki Literature Club, made in 2017, is one of my favorites. It steps away from the grimy and harsh looks of the earlier indie games for something a little more bright and upbeat. While it starts off as a seemingly innocent dating sim and visual novel, it gradually becomes darker and more unsettling as the story progresses. The antagonist, named Monica, who is self-aware as she is in a video game, gets just a bit jealous that the other girls are talking to you, so she deletes them, and then tries to lock you in the game with her forever. And when I say you, I mean the actual player. At one point, she'll just say your actual name by reading your computer files, and if you're recording, she'll recognize and acknowledge it. It's just such a cool game that does a total 180 when you realize what's happening.
Its ability to subvert player expectations and its meta horror establish it as a very well praised classic. Those are the ones I wanted to get through, but there's still a lot more. So here are some honorable mentions. By the way, if you're mad I didn't write a big section about one of these games, it's not because they're bad. These games are really good. I just don't want this video to be 2 hours long, so I'm just going to keep them short. Bendy and the Ink Machine, amazing style and interesting story. Iron Lung, amazing atmosphere and build up to the ending. The Forest, unique survival mechanics and scary mutants. Baldi's Basic, scary game mechanic. Little Nightmares, terrifying atmosphere and really scary gameplay. Cry of Fear, atmospheric and a psychological horror classic. Phasmophobia, fun multiplayer horror, good to play with friends. Poppy Playtime, set the media by storm, so much content. PT, supernatural and atmospheric horror. Scorn, nightmarish world filled with grotesque and disturbing creatures. No, next one. Subnautica, if you have a fear of the ocean, this is the perfect one for you. Alternate Watch, Mandela Catalog, but it's a video game. Doors, surprisingly scary Roblox game, has intriguing monster mechanics. SCP Containment Breach, tense atmosphere and creepy entities. Escape the Backrooms, it's the Backrooms, but it's a video game. Soma, terrifying story and concept. And It Steals, overall panic and horror, great atmosphere. And so many more. That's what makes this genre so unique. There's so many indie horror games filled with different styles and gameplay that there's a good chance anyone would find a good bunch of games to enjoy and play. The indie horror game genre has been growing in popularity in recent years and shows no signs of slowing down. As technology advances and game development tools become more accessible, we can expect to see more innovative and creepy indie horror games in the future. One option is VR indie horror games. This would be super effective from a horror perspective, as VR can create some tense and terrifying atmospheres, making horror games even more effective, combined with all the insane and scary ideas indie developers come up with. Another is cross-genre experiments, with indie horror games already have blended with many other genres such as puzzle games and RPGs. We may see more games that experiment with this cross-genre combination, creating new and unique gaming experiences. And with the rise of AI and all the technology advancements from it, we may see more indie horror games that use AI to generate unpredictable and terrifying experiences. This can include games that use machine learning to create procedurally generated levels or enemies, making each playthrough unique. These games help to establish many of the conventions of the indie horror genre, including player vulnerability, environmental storytelling, media marketing, and the use of psychological horror and jump scares. Overall, the history of indie horror games has been one of innovation and creativity. These games have pushed the boundaries of what is possible in horror genre, and have provided players with countless hours of scares and thrills. The future of indie horror games looks bright, with plenty of potential in innovation and experimentation in the years to come. Thanks for watching.